Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is a game from the 1963 U.S. Championship between Bobby Fischer and pal Benko. Benko, a very strong grandmaster and the guy behind the opening we know today, the Benko Gambit, was unfortunately no match for Fischer. In fact, in this tournament, Fischer played 11 games and won all 11 games. An incredible feat, no doubt, and in this round 10 game, Fischer played simply and finished up with a beautiful combination, one which had Benko 21 moves in, throwing in the towel. So let's have a look and see how this game played out. Fischer opening up with e4, and Benko opting for a modern defense g6. The modern defense, in summary, is allowing for white to build a center, only to later try and take it down. So that's exactly what we see by white. White builds a center, has e4 and d4 in. Bishop g7, knight c3, d6. So with the d6, black will be looking to try and take it down with either c5 or e5. In both instances, this bishop is influenced. This bishop will increase in mobility in some way. So we're also seeing a reason for white delaying this king-knight's development to that f3 square, because with move 4, f4, white is going forward with an Austrian attack, having these three pawns, or trying to use these three pawns right here as a spearhead for some attack against that black king. After knight f6, knight f3, black castles, bishop d3. This right here, it seems like if white is going to be going for an attack, it seems like bishop c4 would be the move to be going with, because it's, opposite that black king. But it's not without its problem, because black has a small combination that could be used to obtain what I feel is a perfectly playable position right here. We could see knight d7 to f6, and then moves like b6, bishop b7, and I think black has a perfectly playable game, and has certainly been successful in breaking up those three pawns. So maybe that's a reason for not playing this bishop to the more aggressive looking c4 square. Instead, bishop d3 and bishop g4, which is a big decision on black's part, because bishop g4 is played with the intention of giving itself up for the knight. Many times in chess you'll see a move like bishop g4 played, and then after your opponent maybe responds with h3, maybe the bishop would then come back or something, and maybe try and make use of the now weakened, let's say, g3 square. But in this case, that's not going to happen. g3 would not be something that is accessible really to the black pieces. And another thing to question is the time spent in making those two moves with the bishop really worth it? And in this case, it wouldn't be. And so that's why I'm saying bishop g4 really is played with the intention of giving itself up for the knight. And that's exactly what we see as soon as white puts a question to it. h3, we have an exchange on f3, and as a direct consequence of not having the knight, d4 is weakened. And so black develops with tempo, but unfortunately it's not an inconvenience to white. White similarly develops only with defense of that d4 square. So black persists with e5, putting another question to that d4 square. And after de, we have f5. And unfortunately for black, they're in a very difficult position, I believe, already, because there's a very strong possibility that if black doesn't act fast, this g pawn can be thrown up to that g4 square. And once it gets to that point, there's a ton of possibilities, really. Let me just point out, if knight d4, let's just do a quick hypothetical. If we had knight d4, queen goes back, and then c6, something that, a move which is a bit purposeful, right? It's taking away that d5 post from the c3 knight. We could have g4, and already white, I believe, is threatening to win the game in some sense, because let's just make a random move like queen c7. We're going to have moves like this, and this bishop gets the door slammed in its face. It's stuck on h8 for the remainder of the game. There's no breaking down this structure. And so things are certainly very critical right away. And so there's even the option after g4 is played, if black now thinks about taking on f5, it's not without allowing the g-rook some play along this g-file. Certainly this white king has not yet committed itself, and white is having a ready-made attack along this newly opened file. So maybe these are a couple of the reasons behind Benko opting to just take on f5 first. So after queen takes on f5, knight d4, hitting the queen. So it's a centralizing move, hitting the queen, but she just calmly comes back to f2 and everything is quite all right, keeping a close eye indirectly on that d4 square. After knight e8, the knight is just looking to reposition. You'll see that many times in a chess game. The knight will retreat in order to just look for a more useful square. And d6 is one which is seemingly more useful. It's going to stay out of the way of this pawn and be supporting potentially its advance, which is something that I don't know that I could really recommend, because it's just allowing for this light square bishop to then show itself in the position. But unfortunately, black is in a very difficult position already. So white fully develops at this point. That's indicated by a direct connection between these white rooks. After knight d6, we now see the queen slowly inching her way towards the black king. And with the first move, it comes with a very serious threat of now bishop h6, since this bishop is now pinned to the king. So black avoids that threat with king h8. Queen g4, trying to get the queen to this hole in the black position, that h5 square. The g pawn for black is absent, and so a direct consequence is that the squares on the h file are all going to be weakened points, and the queen is trying to access h5 because there's a very cunning idea that white has. So an additional reason for this queen's placement might have been to just keep a close eye on f5. In the event black really did want to play that move, well, it's not going to be allowed at this point, not at least without the loss of material. So at this point we see c6, a very purposeful, seemingly, just taking away that d5 square from the knight. But after queen h5 and queen to e8, we see black, unfortunately, on the wrong end of a spectacular combination. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and now rook to f6. What in the world is going on with this? Well, here's what it is. If bishop takes rook, e5, and this bishop, which looked earlier like it was just doing nothing but staring at a pawn, all of a sudden comes to life, and there's no way to prevent mate on h7. There's only one way to delay the inevitable, and that's with just doing computer-like moves, delaying the threat of mate with moves like knight e4 or knight to f5. And so the game would end very quickly if the rook was taken. But in this game, unfortunately, it ends soon enough. We see h6 and then just e5, again just clearing the way for this bishop to show itself in the position. Again, there's no taking the rook because of a mate in 2. And after black's next move, king to g8, because the other threat at this point is just to crash through on h6 with check. So the king is unfortunately having to go back to that g8 square. King g8, and now white calmly just retreats their knight. And with this move right here, black is unfortunately having to resign because this rook is still immune from capture. Bishop takes rook would allow for queen takes pawn, and mate will be coming up right away on that h7 square. And the other threat at this point is to this knight. If this rook can't be captured right now, that means that this knight is having to move, and as soon as it moves, the queen can make use of this f5 square, again getting ready to go to that h7 square. But as it happened in this game, after a simple retreat move, knight to e2, Benko resigns. So that's all for this video. As always, I hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.